In this video, I'm going to show you how to take this extra large men's shirt and turn it into a woman's pleated shirt dress using this as my inspiration. For this refashion, you'll need a shirt which is very large on you to have enough fabric to make the pleats. For reference, this shirt is an extra large men's, and I wear a women's size small or medium. The actual sewing for this shirt is super easy because it's basically straight lines, but it does take some prep work and patience, so keep that in mind. My plan was to make 6 pleats in the front and 8 in the back, so I started by trying on the shirt and roughly pinning the pleats in place. But you can skip this step and use my measurements as a starting point if you prefer. Okay, so let's get started. The first step is to remove the pockets if your shirt has them, because they'll interfere with the pleats. Be careful to cut only the threads and not the fabric. I generally use a seam ripper, but you can use whatever method works for you. I wanted the pleats to start at the level of the 3rd button on the front of the shirt, which is a few inches below the bust. Your measurements may vary, so you might want to try the shirt on first and mark where you want the pleats to start and end, both on the front and the back of the shirt. On the right side of the shirt, draw a guideline for the top of the pleat by making a horizontal line perpendicular to the placket. I'm using a scrap of soap, and for lighter fabrics I generally use a children's washable marker, but use whatever works for you as long as it will wash out. Measure down 3 inches and draw a second line parallel to the first to mark the bottom of the pleat. If you want a longer or shorter pleat, you can adjust it by changing the distance between the 2 lines. To mark the guides for the folds of the pleats, measure 2 inches from the center of the button and make a vertical mark on the horizontal guide line. Then measure 1.5 inches from the mark and make a second mark. Continue making marks 1.5 inches apart until you have 6 in total. Repeat the process on the other side, and remember that the first mark should be 2 inches from the center of the button, but the rest should be 1.5 inches apart. Draw vertical lines parallel to the button placket from the top of the pleat to the bottom to use as guidelines for the folds of the pleats. You should have 6 guidelines on each side of the shirt, so that means 12 total. For the pleats on the back of the shirt, fold the shirt in half to find the center and mark it with a pin on the right side of the fabric. Measure down 13.5 inches from the collar to the top of the pleat. Again, this is my measurement, so yours might be different. Draw the top guideline straight across the back of the shirt. Draw a second line 3 inches below the first to mark the bottom of the pleat. Now we're going to repeat the process we used on the front, except that the first vertical mark will be 3/4 of an inch from the center of the shirt. The rest will be 1.5 inches apart until you have 8 in total. Then repeat the process on the other side. From the marks, draw vertical lines from the top of the pleat to the bottom to use as guides for the folds. You should have 8 vertical guide lines on each side of the shirt, so that makes 16 total. To pin the pleats in place, unbutton the shirt and on the right side of the fabric, pull the second vertical line to the first to create a pleat and then pin it in place at the top and bottom of the horizontal line. Continue with the other lines on the side. Then repeat the process on the opposite side. You should have 3 on each side of the shirt for a total of 6 pleats on the front. Repeat this process on the back, starting at the center and bringing the second line to the first, then pinning it in place. Repeat on the other side, again bringing the fabric towards the center and pinning it in place. Then continue with the rest of the pleats on both sides. You should have 4 pleats on either side of the shirt for a total of 8 pleats on the back. Iron the pleats in place. I'm using a dry setting because I don't want to steam out my guidelines since they're made of soap. The next step is to sew the pleats down. These seams will be visible on the outside of the garment, so you'll want to sew them carefully and use a matching thread color if you don't want your stitches to show. I'm using black on black, which hides stitches really well, but if you have a print fabric or if you use a contrasting thread color, it will make your stitches more visible. To sew down the pleats, try to stay as close to the fold as possible without going over the edge. Start at the top of the horizontal line and sew down to the bottom, carefully back tacking at the beginning and the end. To sew close to the fold, I line up the fold of the fabric with the angle of the presser foot. Your presser foot may be different, so you may want to experiment to find the spot that works best for you. Continue with all the pleats in the front and back, which on my shirt was 14 total. And this is the part where the patience comes in. The last step is to shorten the sleeves. Try the shirt on and mark how long you want the sleeves to be. I marked mine just above the elbow. To cut the sleeves, fold the shirt in half and line up the sleeves at the shoulder and cuff. Since I wanted a 1-inch hem, I added 1.5 inches seam allowance and made a line perpendicular to the fold of the sleeve. Then cut both sleeves at the same time. Turn the shirt inside out, and on the wrong side of the fabric, turn up the raw edge a 1/2 inch and iron into place. Turn up the ironed edge 1 inch and iron into place again and pin into place. Then repeat with the other sleeve. To sew the hem, start at the underarm seam and sew as close to the fold as possible, but don't back tack. Sew all the way around the sleeve until you reach the starting point. Sewing over the shirt's original seams can be tricky, so I sometimes press them down with the tip of a pair of dull scissors to help the machine sew over them. When you get to the beginning, you might get some puckering because of the angle of the sleeve, which is why I like to start at the underarm seam where it won't be as noticeable. Sew over the existing seam and back tack to secure. Repeat on the other sleeve, and that's it. We're done. And here's the result. First, I wanted to show you what the finished pleats look like up close because the black on black is hard to see from a distance. Here you can see what it looks like with 6 pleats in the front and 8 in the back. If your shirt is a little longer or if you're a little more daring, you could wear this as a dress, but I prefer it as a tunic. I generally don't try to dress my age, but there are limits. I also wanted to mention that you don't have to be as detailed as I was with this refashion. You could simply pinch out a couple of pleats, sew them down, and be done with it. You can make the pleats bigger or smaller, make more or less of them, whatever works for you. So I hope this inspires you to try your own refashioning project. Thanks for watching, and happy upcycling!